Hello. Hello, I think we're still just waiting for a few more people before we start. Okay, so we'll make a start. Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. My name's Annie, I'm from the Chamber of Commerce. So we're just going to do a webinar today on the issues and the problems that you might encounter whilst working remotely, which I'm sure a lot of you are at the minute. So I'm going to pass you over to Andy, who'll do a quick introduction, and then Zain's going to do the main presentation. There's a Q&A box if you do want to ask any questions during this. We'll try and answer everything at the end, but if anything isn't answered, we'll do a follow-up and we can pick up any questions that you might have. So over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. So thank you, Annie, for the introduction. So this is a joint collaborative event running with the Greater Manchester Chamber. So just for those who don't know me, my name is Andy Long. I'm a business development manager for NCS IT. My email address is on there if you need to contact me after the event. I'll put it up at the end as well. Obviously, there's going to be quite a few people on this webinar who don't know NCS, so I just wanted to do a very brief agenda and then an introduction. So the agenda is fairly short and to the point, so I'll give you a quick introduction to who NCS are for the people who don't know us. Then I'm going to hand over to our guest speaker today, who is Zain Javed, who's the CTO of our cybersecurity partner Xyone. So Zain is an ethical hacker, is also a GCHQ registered trainer, certified trainer on cybersecurity. So he should have a really interesting presentation for you today. After Zain's done the bulk of the presentation, he's going to pass back to me, and I'll just give you a few little tips that we can perhaps look at from a both from a business and an IT perspective to try and keep your business a little bit more secure. As Annie mentioned, Q&A is open, so there is a Q&A button you'll see, so feel free to ask questions as you go. We'll try and answer them as we go and publish the answers, or we may come back to some at the end that we think might require a little bit more discussion. Okay. So a little bit about NCS. So we've been around now for over 25 years, so we're a well-established IT company, and we're based just north of Manchester up in Rossendale in Lancashire. One of our most one of the accreditations we're most proud of is the fact that we've been a Microsoft partner now for 15 consecutive years. So we've just been accredited again for this year. So that means you're in good hands from an IT perspective. We have a very close working relationship with Microsoft, and all of our engineers are obviously highly trained, and you know we are dealing with the cutting edge technologies that Microsoft are pushing out there. We currently support hundreds of businesses across the UK, with a focus primarily in the north of England, obviously, but we do cover the full UK and abroad as well. So we've got a full help desk based up in Rawtenstall, or at the moment, obviously working from home typically. A lot of our project work focuses on digital transformation and cloud migration. So one of the things I'm going to touch on very briefly is the Microsoft 365 product stack later on. And we're seeing a lot of businesses now, especially with what's going on currently in the world, trying to get more agile, more secure, and get off their old legacy on-premise solutions if possible. It's not possible for everyone, of course, but to try and move stuff into the cloud. And we recommend the Microsoft Cloud, and certainly from a security perspective, there's some really good reasons to be looking at that. In terms of our cyber badges, one accreditation we hold is Cyber Essentials Plus. Zain might deal with this in a little bit more detail, but Cyber Essentials Plus is a government accreditation. There's two levels, the Cyber Essentials and the Plus accreditation, and that's something that you might want to consider for your own businesses as well. Above that, we're also an ISO 27001 accrediting company, which is information security standard. What this really means is that when we're dealing with your networks and your systems, you can trust us that we've actually got the right procedures and security practices in place. So you can trust us with your often confidential information that we're dealing with. And lastly, and perhaps most relevant for today, is we have a trusted partnership with Xyone Cybersecurity, who I'm not going to steal any thunder from Zain, but they are experts in cybersecurity, and that's all they do. So we partner with them to do that side of the business for our clients. We work very, very closely together and have done for a number of years. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Zain, who's going to take over the presentation now.
Great, thank you for that, Andy.
No problem at all.
Hi everyone. What I'm going to quickly do is try and share my screen. Just give me a quick signal. You can see that okay, yeah?
I can do, yeah. I just want to go full screen. Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, great, good stuff. Right, let's just make a start on this. So, hi everyone. As Andy mentioned, I'm Zain. I'm the CTO of Xyone Cybersecurity. Anyone who's not heard of us before, we're based at Lancaster University. That's where our sort of HQ is. We've been working with the university as well as other academia around the northwest mainly, so Liverpool John Moores and Salford University, Manchester University. And what we try to do is work on innovative new research ideas and commercialize them and help the organizations in regards to cyber security. Because the cyber criminals are always one step ahead, and it's a catching race, and that's what we try and do, is leverage on the groundbreaking research that the various academia produce. We have some offices in London and Manchester as well. We have a very sort of national, and we have some international clients as well that we work with. In terms of accreditation and skills, so just a quick sort of overview of the badges that we've got, just so I can assure you that I've got the right credentials to be speaking about the subject. We are ISO 27001, same as NCS, which means we have to practice what we preach. We're a certification body for Cyber Essentials, as Andy mentioned. It's a government-backed scheme, so we certify organizations and making sure that they meet the minimum requirements to be dealing with business online. So any kind of online activity that you have, it's recommended, highly recommended, that you implement Cyber Essentials. So it's a government-backed scheme. It's been going on since 2014, and that's since when we've been accrediting people. We also have numerous sort of hackers, ethical hackers. If you're not from this world and you don't know what ethical hacking means, it's basically simulating the real-life hacking scenario on an organization. So we try and hack your website or infrastructure and so on, and then we can give you some feedback and recommendations on how you can improve your security. So hopefully when real cyber criminals try and hack you, they stand no chance at doing that, or you're minimizing the risk as much as possible. We also help the public sector, as well as investing into the research in the UK. So we involve a lot of cyber investment projects to strengthen the security of the whole of the UK. So nationally, we have a program in place to help the country in that regard. So let's start with how big the problem is, and we're going to show you some stats. I think I'm going to just chuck some stats at you. I'm not a huge fan of stats, it's just the context that they're in, but it does help us kind of understand the threat landscape. So £3 million is the UK average cost of a breach in 2019. So from the organisations that were surveyed across the world, and also in the UK, they picked the ones in the UK and they said around £3 million is the average cost of a breach. Okay. 279 days is the average time to identify and contain a breach. So that means someone's looking to hack your organization, and they managed to actually hack your organization, and they infiltrated your network. They're inside and you don't know what they're doing, and you identify that someone's actually hacked in, and the amount of time it takes to then remove them off the network, so you're completely sure that no one has basically infiltrated your organization, it takes 279 days. Okay, so there have been many cases where criminals have been in the organization's network for a very long time before we even realize that they're there. It's quite scary. 279 days obviously is a very long time. Hackers attack every 39 seconds, so on average 2,244 times a day. And you think, well, is this realistic? And I can absolutely tell you it is, because these criminals have created really innovative bots which are completely automated, so they don't have to sit there in front of the computers all the time. They just let these automated bots kind of roam the internet and look for vulnerable devices, and they can then exploit those devices to gain access into organizations. So it's quite scary on how automated the whole process is. Cybercrime is a bigger threat than nuclear war, as Andy's probably seen. I love using this stat on every single slide, every single presentation that I do, mainly because it gives us a whole idea of how big the threat is and what we're dealing with. So this quote from the UK government back in 2013, but it's still pretty relevant today, because more than ever we're connected to digital devices. We are trusting more and more of our data, confidential data, not just corporate business data, but personal data as well, in terms of all our pictures that we are uploading, our documents. More and more we're utilizing the internet. So we have absolutely no idea where it's actually sitting on. It's for example, in the cloud somewhere. So we kind of trust that. So it's more important now than ever to actually understand who are you trusting your data with. So the suppliers that you're providing it to, and the actual application that you're using, all of those things. It's very important that you now take greater care around your privacy and data. 480% rise in data breaches reported to FCA. So this is more of a financial sector stat. And again, I just wanted to highlight, because a lot of the times people think cyber criminals are only targeting certain type of clients, but it is very cross-sector. They'll get their hands on anything that is vulnerable. So any kind of low-hanging fruit they will go for. Any attractive larger clients, obviously there's more money in that. So for financial industry, it's a huge problem that's increasing every day. Okay, let's talk about small businesses. So again, in the past, I've heard businesses, especially small businesses, saying that they are not big enough for a hacker to target them, or they don't think they have anything that the hackers would want. Okay, and the stats kind of tell you otherwise. 58% of breaches took place as small businesses. So over half of the breaches actually conducted on small businesses. Average cost of a SMB data breach is around £65,000, and as a result of this, 2 in 3 businesses don't survive. They don't make it because they can't sustain that loss, and they can't bounce back from that. 62% lack the skills in-house to deal with security issues, and they don't have the necessary resources, skills in-house to deal with that. So they kind of are doing what they think is right, and unfortunately that means that the cyber criminals take advantage of that. SMEs might not have the best security in the world in terms of best hardware, your firewall or antivirus, or quite simple things like policies and procedures. In those environments is quite relaxed, and cyber criminals take advantage of those situations, and that's why they target small businesses, because they know that there is a greater chance of them succeeding in their attack than trying to, say, for example, trying to hack a bank, because the bank will have crazy amount of security on there, so the chances of actually getting through is quite small. So that's why they try and attack the low-hanging fruit. Now let's look at the actual current circumstances of what's going on. So coronavirus scams. So increase in March relating to the coronavirus frauds was around 400%. So as soon as this all kicked off, around about obviously March, there's 400% increase in frauds that are related to that. £800,000 was the cost of victims just in 1 month. Okay, and 3% of all global spam is now estimated to be COVID-19 related. So what happens is when there is a major event, cyber criminals take advantage of that. They have no morals at all. They will go for anything that they think they can make some money out of, or that will aid them into succeeding. So they will leverage the situation by sending emails that obviously people are already worried about, or they have some fear around, and they will take advantage of that. And the stats basically show that. So it's not one of those Nigerian prince emails that you get. We're way far ahead of that time now. They're a lot more sophisticated, and they understand exactly the right buttons to press to get the information they need. So you have to be really vigilant now. How factors increased or decreased the total cost of data breach. So this is a good slide, so forgive me because it's in American dollars, but it's research that was done by IBM Security. I won't go through every single one. I won't take up your valuable time by going through this slide for the next 10 minutes, but it's just a quick highlight to show that the more you invest, the less likely you are of actually having to sort of pay less amount of money to a breach. So what we're saying is that if you had a breach, what would happen after that? If you have these things in place, then the cost is minimized, because security is never 100%. I'm not going to sit here and say that by using our services or by getting the best security systems and spending £1 million, you're going to be 100% secure. That's never going to happen. But what you can do is get the most out of your security and trying to minimize the risk as much as possible. And this is what this basically slide is telling you, that the organizations who do have a lot more investment into the type of, for example, incident response team, extensive use of encryption, business continuity, all of those things means that the average total cost is far less than someone who's dealing a lot with third party, or they're handing a lot of data to third parties, they're using a lot of cloud migration, for example. Then the chances are increased. We're not saying they're definitely going to get hacked, but the chances are increased. So that means they have to invest more into security because there's more risks, quite simply. Okay, let's move on to risk of remote working. So remote working obviously presents a huge new problem. A lot of organizations who may not be used to working from home or finding new and innovative ways of working. Obviously, if you add the whole pressure of family and kids and everyone being in the same place at the same time, it just adds more and more. It kind of makes it more fun, right, to do work from home with your kids and pets, sort of making noises in the background. But what we're going to look at first is it's weakened the security controls. Okay, so again, every business is different, so you might be a lot better than others, or they're not saying everyone's the same, but majority of the times it does weaken the security, because employees are now using their home Wi-Fi instead of the office network, which is obviously you're now working in an unregulated environment. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that you're connecting and doing your work reports or browsing on the internet on the same network that your kids may be trying to download some apps and games and visiting the internet and trying to click on God knows what kind of website. And that obviously presents a huge risk, because if one device gets compromised without the necessary controls in place, without the actual commercial graded security systems in place, that could affect all of your devices. Okay, so again, it's important to pick the right solution to help you mitigate against those types of threat. Okay, information can be weaponized. So over the past few months, attackers have started taking advantages of human weaknesses. Okay, so the perfect example is you're usually in the office and no one can actually get to you without going through 3 or 4 different levels of, I don't know, barriers, or what do you call your guards. Whereas now it's a lot different, because someone can send you a quick email, as well as a quick phone call, which may be routed directly to you. Before, you used to go through reception or something, but now it's maybe routed directly to you, and they can speak to you and trying to get more information out of you than before, when you were in a work environment and you felt more secure. Also, you're in touch with your colleagues, who obviously can alert you if there is any kind of suspicious activity that's going on. But now it's obviously that there's that danger as well, that if your calls are routed, or if you're interacting with someone without being in a work environment where you've got your colleagues that you can speak about, etc., the lack of communication obviously has a greater impact. Whoever with ineffective communication in place, organizations are more prone to human error. So quite similar to what I've just mentioned, if you're not in an environment where you're in touch with your colleagues, that presents another danger, giving you false sort of sense of security. And phishing emails, again, there's been a 600 increase in reported phishing emails since the end of February. So it's absolutely, escalated to a point where it's very difficult to understand which email is actually legitimate and which email is not. You have spam filters in place, which we hope that they remove a lot of the junk, and we kind of rely on them. But unfortunately, the cyber criminals will always find new ways to bypass those controls. They look to kind of get the email out in front of the end user as much as possible. Okay, so phishing emails have increased massively, and because of that, some organizations have been victim to obviously cyber attacks, and we've seen that on the news. I think the latest one was Honda, that was on the news. Before that, EasyJet was a big one. So many organizations are falling foul of these attacks. And after if you've had a breach, that could obviously impact your reputation the most. Okay, so we can come to cash flow after that. But reputation damage, it can take years and years to build a reputation, and it can take just one cyber attack to take that away. Impact on cash flow. So some obviously banks will refund the amount, or they will look to kind of, if you've been a victim of fraud, they'll have special things in place to try to get you up and running. But it's not always the case. We've had a real life client who approached us when they had a cyber attack, and it took them a year before they could retrieve around 70% of the money they actually lost. So it's not always the case that if someone steals money from us, we'll get it back. Director partner management responsibilities. So again, it's up to the management to ensure that there is right procedures in place and your right security in place. The interruption to business is again quite a big one, where it stops you from doing what you should be doing. Insurance payout, if you do have cyber insurance, then again, it's best to look at those policies to make sure that you're covered properly. So all insurance policies are different. If you do have specific cyber liability insurance, I absolutely recommend that. But if you obviously don't, or if you have a general one, then look at the terms and conditions and exclusions. GDPR, so fines up to 20 million or 4% of global annual turnover, whichever is higher. So they've GDPR obviously been around for a couple of years now, and it is obviously again another thing that you have to look at, that if you have a breach, not just the money that's taken away by the cyber criminals, but the information commissioner officer can also fine you, and there's additional cost to the breach than the actual money that's been stolen by the cyber criminals. Okay. Okay, so those are obviously the dangers, and I thought I'll add some tips as well when you're working from home or when you're remote working. and these are just sort of good cyber hygiene to make sure that you have good things set up correctly at home. So for home setup, check your router is secure and it's encrypted with the latest Wi-Fi security. If you're not sure how to do that, you can ring up your internet service provider or look online, or if you have an IT support company like NCS, give them a call. I'm sure they'll be able to kind of advise you on how to do that. The best thing is to make sure that you don't use a weak Wi-Fi security on your router, because a lot of the old technologies can be easily cracked. You have automated software that can easily crack the encryption passwords and allow anyone to join your network and see what's going on. Change your default password on your router. So again, because you're in an increased increased attack now, you're in that mode where a lot of cyber criminals are going to be sending you loads of phishing emails. As we said, been a 600% rise. That means that they will try and leverage the vulnerabilities on your home routers, the devices that you're using at home. So a lot of the routers don't get updated because, let's face it, when you first receive your router, you use it, you set it up, and if it's working, you kind of leave it alone. And I get that's the danger, that some of those routers actually have a lot of vulnerabilities that if you don't patch or if you don't update, it can obviously cause a cyber attack. Social engineering, so avoid clicking any links or downloading attachments if the email doesn't look genuine. Okay, it's quite easy to obviously say that, but you have to use your own nouns, and if you don't have any kind of awareness training in place, then I absolutely 100% recommend that you do some sort of awareness training, because there is a lot of different ways someone can try and phish you. So it's not just simply as getting a link. They keep upping the game. If you suspect an email of being suspicious, report the email to your IT team. So don't spread it, send it all around the company or to your colleagues. Send it to someone in your IT team, make them aware so they can deal with it appropriately. Scammers can also target you via telephone or text message. So it's not just email. You've got smishing now as well, which is SMS phishing, phishing, which is your verbal on the phone. As I was mentioned before, they're trying to ring you up to get more information out of you. And physical security is also important as well as that. So and before I talk about that, we have to look at the actual antivirus and anti-malware software. So those, make sure that they are enabled. You necessarily don't need to have the most expensive security software out there. You just need to make sure that the one that you have is configured correctly and is giving you the right features to defend yourself. Use a VPN if possible. So your company may have already set up a virtual private network. So that's a way to communicate securely. Again, there are obviously technologies like, for example, Office 365 that don't require a VPN because you've got a HTTPS encryption connection, but I'm sure Andy will be able to talk about that further. Use a password manager. Always secure your passwords in an encrypted container. Lock your screen when moving away. Securely store your devices and documents in a safe place when not in use. Shut down devices at the end of your working day. Those are the little things that you can do to enhance your security. And also don't let your kids or other members of your family use your work device. That can present another danger because they've not had the necessary training as you may have. Communication is also key. Use your company approved methods for communicating and sharing files. Just because you're at home doesn't mean you can use, your Dropbox or your personal cloud that you use for personal files or personal emails. Don't use that. Carry on using what your company have provided you with. Work in a public space. Make sure your screen's not on display. Don't sit next to the windows if you think people can actually see your screen. Consider using sort of a privacy filter on your laptop. Also try making phone calls in a private room. Abide by your company, bring your own device policy. So if you do have bring your own device policy, make sure you are following that correctly. Structure your time efficiently, resist any kind of distractions, and keep in contact with your colleagues and managers. So that's a key thing as well, making sure that you're mentally well as well, and you're always obviously talking to people. Obviously, phishing is a big problem, and the slide just mentioned about the 90% of phishing emails 90% of cyber attacks originate from phishing emails, and this is the one that I experienced just last week. So I thought it was great to kind of mention that and use that as a case study, because someone tried to obviously send me a phishing email. So this is obviously, so actually no, this is the example one. The one I had was after that. So this is a COVID-19 related one where they're saying, you know, coronavirus safety measures, click this download link, which is a PDF, and you can obviously see the safety measures. And you know, obviously it's quite a simple one, but this is more clever. So this is one that was sent to me, and they sent it via Dropbox. So you can see someone shared this file with me through Dropbox. So the email address is noreply@dropbox.com. Now this is not from Dropbox at all. So this is quite clever how they've done that. They've also, in the subject matter, they've put small business grant and COVID-19 relief payout PDF, trying to entice you into clicking on it, because a lot of businesses are in this situation and they're obviously looking for various different means of funding, etc. And it's simply a PDF link that says expires in 4 days, so there's a matter of urgency, and you're obviously trying to get you to click on that. We'll also bring your attention to, a lot of people don't know this, but if you're on this webinar today, it's something that might help you. Can you see this little small square at the bottom? It's like a little small black square right at the bottom of this email, and that is basically a pixel tracker. And that's not just used by phishing guys. A lot of marketing emails have that in there as well. And it's a way to track who's actually opened the email, who's clicked on the email, and so on. Okay, so a lot of, you know, your sort of marketing email that you get, they have this in as well. So a lot of sales guys actually use this technique, but obviously the criminals are also utilizing that to understand who clicked on that email. And if they think someone's engaging with it, they will then send them another phishing email because they know that they've got this guy and they can, you know, persuade them to giving more information. So anyway, when you click this link, you then go to Dropbox. So you're actually on the Dropbox website. So this is fully legit on the actual Dropbox website. And then there is a PDF that you can download. So you can then obviously click that PDF from Dropbox, and then the PDF opens. Obviously I'm using Adobe Reader, and also want to make sure, please don't click on these links, you know, definitely don't do that. I used a virtual machine which had nothing on there, so it's a completely sort of blank device that I use in case there was a virus or anything. It's not going to affect my information, so that's what I used before experimenting. And when you open the PDF, it then has another link which says click this to access the document, and obviously this is the Office 365 link, right? And then you click that link and it'll take you to Google Docs. So it'll take you to Google Drive, and then that's where the actual file is hosted, where you actually click and it downloads on your computer. So you're thinking, why they're jumping from Dropbox to obviously, you know, PDF, which is Office 365, and then it goes to Google Drive. It's all to evade your junk mail. Okay, so this is what they're doing to try and bypass your filters. You know, they will do all of these things in the hope that someone will actually keep clicking through and at the end get the malware. Unfortunately, you know, for this one, or you know, fortunately, whatever way you look at it, Google took that file down. It obviously is someone must have reported this, and they found that it was obviously in violation of the terms, and they took that file down. But obviously there was a bit of a delay before this happens. So yeah, just wanted to give you an example on what is the new ways to try and trick people into clicking on links. They'll embed these links into various documents and so on to try and bypass the filters. Okay, so what can happen if you actually click on a link? So quite briefly, I know I'm taking a lot of time here. So ransomware attack, you might have heard of in the news, a credential compromise, meaning that they're actually they're stealing your username and password. Supply chain, so they're trying to get to someone, a parent organization, and they'll work their way from the bottom and work their way up. Doorway for hackers, so it just presents an opportunity for them to try and get into your network. Obviously, big data breaches mean big fines. Cryptojacking, this is again quite a new thing which you might not be familiar with, but it's a way to try and mine cryptocurrency on the internet. These guys do that. So quick recommendation on how to spot a phishing email. So blurred logos and images. Again, just to kind of highlight you, these are your general tips. But the biggest one out of all this is, what kind of experience and awareness that you have. So that means that you can follow all these to a T, but you still have to be cautious. And there's no harm in actually thinking, if your boss's email is scam, but it's always better to ask rather than acting on it. So you better be safe than sorry, right? So you don't want to be sending some money to a cyber criminal or clicking on a link rather than just giving a quick text message or phone call to the person who sent it to. Can avoid a whole lot of trouble afterwards. Okay. So what we've done, so during the pandemic, what we did was we offered 3 of our most relevant training courses free of charge. So we created a new website. So we have a awareness training platform called Mitigate Hub. And on Mitigate Hub, you have lots of training on various different things, including GDPR and lots of other ones. But we picked the 3 that we thought was most relevant to people now they're working from home, and we open it for absolutely free. So you don't need to use any kind of information. We don't have a time limit on this, so it's completely free for as long as you want. And you can register that by going to remoteworking.mitigatehub.com, and you can set up an account. You can send it to all your work colleagues if you wanted to, and you'd be able to utilize and give them the right awareness. So what we've gone through, but obviously in a lot more detail with scenario-led exercises as well. Okay, so I think I've taken a lot of the time. So thank you very much for listening. Again, if you've got any specific questions or if you want some more information, feel free to get in touch with me, and I'll be more than happy to help. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you very much, Zain. Hopefully people found that useful. There's been a couple of questions coming in there, but I'm just going to touch on some of the things in my next slide. So I'm just going to share my desktop. 1 second. Okay. So picking up on some of the things that Zain mentioned there. So we're just going to look at a few of the basic things you can do as a business and as an individual to try and mitigate some of the risk that we're all experiencing at the moment. As Zain said, there's a massive threat at the moment, and a lot of it is not really IT related. It's more to do with your being a human, and the thing that they will prey on your fears at the moment, and the fact that you are perhaps stuck in a house with, as Zain mentioned, with your kids, and animals and pets and life going on around you. So you're not always as focused as you may be in the office. So some of the basic things we can do is, the first thing is you really need to establish a security baseline for your business. That's basically saying there's no point putting lots of things in place unless you actually know where you stand at this point in time. So there's a few things you can do to help there. So one is things like pen testing, penetration testing, and vulnerability scans. So that will give you a good idea of what vulnerabilities you have on your network. So if you are going back to a centralized head office location with servers, for example, on premise, that will give a good example of the threats that you actually face there. Running a phishing campaign is quite an interesting one. So obviously you don't want to wait for your staff to receive these emails and then hopefully not act on them. What we can do through in partnership with Xyone is to actually tailor a campaign where we will target your staff, and you will see what the click-through rate is, who makes the mistakes, and it's not an exercise of finding who you can bash over the head. It's really just see where the weaknesses lie, who needs more training, and those phishing campaigns can start off simple and they can get more and more complex. Some of the more complex ones, to be fair, a lot of people will fall for, because that's what hackers are doing these days. They're being very, very complex in the way they're attacking people, and it's not as simple as Zain mentioned. It's not a Nigerian prince offering you $1 million anymore. They're a lot more subtle. You can get accreditations, so Cyber Essentials is a good start. It's fairly simple to do. We can help with the consultancy, and Xyone can actually provide the accreditation. Cyber Essentials Plus is a little bit more involved, but again, start with the basic. At least you've got a good level there where you can say, right, we've got the basics in place, and then we can start building on top of that. So Zain touched on patching, so fairly basic stuff, but making sure that all your Microsoft and third-party patches are applied, so your Windows patches, any servers, for example, and also mobile phones as well, because people are accessing data on their mobiles. So make sure you're running an up-to-date version of Android or iOS, and when a new update comes, don't just ignore it, just make sure you get them installed. Running unsupported operating systems is a major issue. So the obvious one now is Windows 7. We've had a massive campaign at NCS to make sure all our clients are off Windows 7. Once Microsoft stops supporting it and patching it, then it's a free-for-all. So a new vulnerability comes out, Microsoft aren't going to be able to patch that. So you're then at much greater risk. And the other thing is, can you actually confirm if you've got an estate of 10, 100, 1,000 PCs? Can you easily see what all those PCs are doing, which ones are vulnerable, which ones aren't updated? More importantly, if it's not your PCs, if these are devices that are people working from home on their own devices, how do you know they're working from a secure device and accessing your information? So talking about passwords, passwords are a bit of a tricky one at the moment. Microsoft are trying to fade out passwords entirely, and there's a very good reason for that. You could have the world's most complicated password that's 20 characters long, randomly generated, but if I phish you and I get those credentials off you, I've got your password. Doesn't matter how complex it is, I've got those details. So when it comes to passwords, as a bare minimum, try and use unique passwords for each account, and then use things like LastPass or any other password manager that's that you'd like to try. LastPass is one that we can recommend for storing those securely, but also generating those very complex passwords. So at least if one account gets compromised, they're not going to then run riot through all your other accounts by testing the same credentials. But the aim from Microsoft very much is to move away from passwords, because that's a very human element of people writing down passwords, trying to remember easy ones, kid's name plus year of birth, the typical things that people use, which are easily guessed. So what we'd always recommend for any kind of account is multi-factor authentication, or some people call it two-factor, but things have moved on slightly. So multi-factor is basically looking at multiple ways of proving who you are. So the first one will be something like a password or a PIN or a secret question. The next one will be something you have. So typically these days, everyone's got a smartphone, so it will then prompt you on your smartphone. And the last thing is something you are. So typically now, I will get prompted on my phone. I'll say, yes, I approve that login. It'll then say, use your fingerprint scanner to prove that you are actually who you say you are. So once you've got those things in place, you're then allowed to successfully log in. So that then protects against, well, Microsoft claim 99.9% less likely to be compromised if you use MFA. So you've got to remember that hackers aren't just after money in the simplest term. They're not looking to hack into a bank account. They're typically looking for credentials to allow them access to a system from where they can elevate from a low, risk person, if you like, or a person with very little access on the network, but they can elevate those credentials all the way up to admin level, at which point they have the keys to your kingdom, and then they can start doing things with your databases and accessing bank accounts, etc. One of the things we recommend very much is, where possible, to move to a cloud-based system. So Microsoft 365 is Microsoft's cloud platform. So this slide looks a bit complicated at first, but basically it's taking that multi-factor authentication to the next level. Because you're now connected to a cloud-based system, you've got this immense amount of cloud computing power, lots of artificial intelligence, constantly looking at the threats and how people are accessing the systems, and it evolves. So it's very, very clever. So rather than just saying you've given the right username and password and you've logged in on your phone, it can do some more clever things to actually check, is that still you? Could there still be a threat? So you can see on the left hand side, someone's logging in to a system in the cloud. What the cloud system will then do through Microsoft 365, it'll look at your location, it'll look at the device you're logging into, it'll look at the application you're coming from. So all these things, it builds a picture. So if you're logging in from the same device you always log in from the same location you always log in from, you've put the right credentials in, it's going to allow you access. If it's not sure, if there's something not quite right, something slightly different, it may then prompt you for multi-factor authentication. A common example would be, I've logged in Manchester here, and then 2 minutes later I log in Russia. That's clearly not right. So at that point, it could then limit access or block access completely from my account, because clearly there's been a compromise at that stage. Once you've passed all these checks, you'll then be allowed to access the apps and the data that you need to access in the cloud. So by using Microsoft 365, you then open up this immense power that perhaps you wouldn't normally have if you just connected to a server in your office, for example. So that then mitigates a lot of the risk to do with likes of VPNs and the actual device itself. So you're coming from a device, you've still got to go through an awful lot of security checks before it'll actually allow you access to it. In terms of the devices themselves, so within Microsoft 365, we can deploy things like mobile device management. So that again is checking that the device you're coming from is patched, has got the right policies in place, it's encrypted. Only when it's gone through all this checklist, it will say, yes, you definitely, that's a safe device, off you go, you can access the data. And the same applies to mobile devices as well. So I use a personal device for work, an Android device, but if something happened to my device, my administrator could wipe the email part of it, my SharePoint data, my OneDrive data could all be wiped very quickly, and it's encrypted. And without those policies being forced, I can't use my mobile device. And lastly, the data itself. So again, we move a lot of clients from a typical on-premise file share, where you may have a network with folders in it, to the likes of SharePoint or OneDrive in the Microsoft cloud. So once your file data is up in the cloud, we can then start doing some much more clever policies to make sure that data is protected. First of all, making sure the right people are accessing it. Once you've got it, if you're sharing data, for example, you can control where that data goes. If you accidentally share data, which everyone's done, they've attached the wrong document to an email, for example, you can kill that document wherever it lives in the world, because it's always talking back to the cloud. So by putting these policies in place in the cloud level, it doesn't matter where that data goes. If it leaves your business, you can still be in control of it. So again, that's another feature within Microsoft 365 that we can help deploy to make your remote workers more secure. It makes their life easier because they can always access the data from any device, but you know that data is secure when it's up there. Another thing Zain touched on there was the actual staff awareness, because you can have the best systems in the world, but if your staff are not aware of the threats, they're the ones who are going to get manipulated by the criminals. So things like regular training. So Zain mentioned some free training they can offer through Xyone. Testing of awareness levels, so the phishing campaigns, making sure people are actually aware of what the current threats are. And I think Zain mentioned it as well, it's not just an IT threat. People come through a phone call or even physical attacks as well. Possibly less so when you're at home. They'll typically target a business, I presume, but that is quite a common threat attack vector, if you like, where people will physically turn up at a building pretending to be from BT. They will then be on the network and they can do what they need to do. That happens more and more commonly than perhaps people think. So that really sums up what we're looking at today. So really, hopefully, there's a few points you can take away with regards to how you can stay secure when you're working remotely, but also when things do return to normal. I think remote working is obviously going to be a lot more prevalent. So by putting in the some of the mitigating training, for example, on awareness for your staff, making sure your systems are up to date, but also taking advantage of some of the more advanced cloud-based technologies through the likes of Microsoft 365, you're reducing the risk to your business, reducing the risk of data being stolen, credentials being stolen, and ultimately money being taken out of your bank account or intellectual property being stolen from the business. So that's everything from me today. If you need to follow up with any specific questions, that's my email address there. So it's andy@ncs.cloud. I will just open up to the other guys. If you could just come off mute, if there's anything else that you'd like to add.
No, I think there was another question from Scott, but
Yeah.
obviously we can pick that up directly if that's all right with Scott.
Yeah. Yep. So I did give him a quick response. So Scott was asking about prioritising external services and interface points. Happy to talk about that afterwards, Scott, if you want to pick that up. But what we were talking about there quite clearly was your main sort of attack point now is going to be end users' devices. So it's going to be people with a laptop sat at home, could well be their personal device. That is then perhaps the biggest threat now to your business, because you're not inside your nice corporate environment with a protected network. So it's ways of managing user devices, but also their identities when they're accessing, for example, a Microsoft Cloud or Dropbox or AWS or Salesforce, whatever it may be, making sure the right people are accessing the right information. So if there's no other questions, we will finish there. There will be a recording available of this if you need to go over anything, but please do get in touch with myself or Zain. If there's anything specific come through myself, and myself and Zain can quite happily get back in touch with you and answer that. But we will now finish that. So thank you very much for your time today, and hopefully we'll be in touch with you very soon with another event. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Annie. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.